Is a Jew permitted to hate? Is a Jew perhaps obligated to hate? On one hand, we always say that Judaism is a religion of action, that our feelings, even our beliefs, are sort of immaterial. As long as we do what we need to do and refrain from doing what we must refrain from doing, then God is happy. This is the idea behind Na'aseh v'nishma, the response our ancestors gave when the Torah was presented to them. Na'aseh means we will do. We'll do whatever you tell us to do. A religion of action, not necessarily one that prioritizes beliefs or feelings. On the other hand, the Torah often, very explicitly, seems to care about how we feel, not just what we do. You shall love the Lord your God. Do not covet. Love, jealousy. A pretty strong case could be made that the Torah does want to regulate our feelings and not just our actions. This idea might help explain the two altars that we are introduced to in this morning's Parsha. Why do we need two altars in the temple? There was a golden altar upon which the incense was offered, and there was a copper altar, the large altar, upon which the animals were offered. According to the 16th century Kli Yakar, Rabbi Ephraim of Lunshitz, it's because each altar atones for a different kind of sin. There are sinful actions, and to atone for those sins we need the copper altar. For those sins we sacrifice animals, which are grossly physical beings. But for sins of the spirit, animals don't do the trick. We need something less tangible, incense that's placed upon the golden altar, offered up in smoke to purify us before the Lord. So there are sins of the body, and there are also sins of the soul, imperfections in one's character, shortcomings of temperament and sentiment that make us unclean whether or not they lead to sins committed by the body. And the question is hatred one of those sins? I was thinking of that question as I watched an interview on YouTube with the parents of Shani Luke, Hashem Yinkom Dama. Who is Shani Luke? She was arguably the most famous victim of the October 7th massacre. In the early hours of that horrific day, she was shot in the head and murdered by Hamas terrorists, who then stripped her naked and took her corpse in a white pickup truck with 5 terrorists sprawling their legs over her mangled and bloodied corpse as her body was desecrated by hundreds of onlookers shouting Allahu Akbar. Never before have some 1 billion people watched a video of an attractive, young, 22-year-old girl paraded around in her underwear as men beat her dead corpse in the name of glorifying their God. She is likely the most violated woman in the history of the world. Shani's father is Israeli, but her mother, Ricarda, is a German convert to Judaism. She made Aliyah in the early 1990s. She also lived in Portland, Oregon in the early 2000s. And Shani attended kindergarten at Portland Jewish Academy, the pluralistic Jewish day school in Portland. During the interview, Ricarda Luck was asked the question of all questions. Do you regret your decision to convert to Judaism and your decision to make Aliyah? Why is this the question of all questions? I'll quote to you directly from the Talmud, Tractate Yevamot, chapter 4. The rabbis taught, when someone presents himself for conversion, we say to him, "Why do you wish to convert? Are you not aware that nowadays Israelites are careworn, stressed, despised, harassed, and persecuted?" If he responds, "I know, and I feel unworthy to share their troubles," we accept him at once. Of all the aspects of the Jewish covenant, of all the complex elements of Jewish theology and identity and peoplehood and belonging, the Talmud cares about one element more than all the others, and that is what Soloveitchik called the covenant of fate. Do you understand that you will pay a price for being a Jew, and do you agree to pay it willingly? Do you commit to intertwine your fate with the fate of the Jewish people for good, but also for bad? It is the question of all questions, posed to a mother whose decision to convert inflicted upon her daughter the most intense kind of torture and degradation and humiliation that one could ever imagine. She was asked, "Do you regret your decision?" Ricarda Luck echoed the most famous and eloquent speech of the Bible, delivered by King David's Moabite great-grandmother, Ruth. She said that the Israeli people are her people, that the Jewish people are her people, that her remaining 3 children are Jewish, that is how they will be, and that she would want to live nowhere else than Eretz Yisrael. She also revealed that the IDF had told her and her husband that 2 of the 5 terrorists shown in the video had already been eliminated. When the interviewer expressed satisfaction at this comment and said that he hoped the other 3 would be killed soon too, she disagreed. She said, "I don't want to be angry. Whether they live or die is not my focus." There's something about the way Ricarda Luck answered that question that provoked me to address this notion of Judaism and hatred. She did not say that she wasn't angry. She didn't say she wasn't hateful. She said, "I don't want to be angry." And I think she chose her words very carefully. Because the idea that the murder of your daughter might culminate, among other things, but might culminate at least partially with a legacy of hatred that changes you on the inside for the worst, just makes the crime all the more pernicious. On the other hand, in Judaism, there are some crimes that we are told not to forget, and there are some crimes that we are told not to forgive. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks wrote a brilliant piece about a decade ago called Two Types of Hatred. In it, he argues that there are different kinds of hatred and that Jews are forbidden to engage with one, but commanded to engage with the other. The first kind of hatred is irrational, unconditional hatred, a hatred that cannot be reasoned with and that makes no sense. It's a hatred that doesn't begin in the intellect, but with pure, raw emotion. And that is a hatred that is forbidden for any Jew. It is the hatred of racism, of chauvinism, of ageism, of classism. For these kinds of sins, you must atone for on that golden altar. But there are other kinds of hatred that are rational. It is important to hate evil. It is important to hate immorality. For building a just society, it's important that we feel anger towards those people who lie and cheat and steal and murder and break the rules. Every Friday night in synagogue, we read a certain psalm, Ohavei Adonai Sin'u Ra. If you love God, you will hate evil. And in the 15th Psalm, which is often recited at funerals, the righteous man is described as despising flagrant sinners, but honoring those who deserve to be honored. I think the reason people are afraid to feel hatred is because hatred can sour our personalities. This is what I believe Ricarda Luke was talking about. She didn't want to become a hateful person. The great Elie Wiesel often spoke about this. He refused to hate the Nazis and Hitler because, quote, hatred is a cancer that spreads. With all due respect to Wiesel, I would offer that Judaism offers a more complex perspective. Judaism, just as it insists that we control our love, our passion, our sadness, our jealousy, it also insists that we control our hatred. Control it, not pretend that it doesn't have its place. Like all other emotions, a wise person can and must contend with hatred, learn to focus it, direct it, control it in productive ways. That when it comes to the SS, to the Gestapo, to ISIS, to Hamas, to the Iranian terrorist government, Judaism doesn't just permit us to feel hatred, it requires us to feel it. I've taught before from the Midrash, Kol mi shena'asa rachaman b'makom achzari. Any person who shows compassion when he ought to show cruelty, sof shena'aseh achzari b'mkom rachaman, will ultimately show cruelty when he is called to show compassion. We should have no hatred in our hearts whatsoever towards Arabs, Palestinians, or Muslims. What we need to hate is Hamas, the monsters and savages who shot Shani Look in the head, stripped her naked, desecrated her body because she was guilty of one sin, being Jewish. That's it. Since Israel's catastrophic withdrawal from Gaza in 2005, the Jewish state has fought 5 wars to protect itself against these terrorist monsters. Each time, Israel has stopped short. Each time, we've lost our energy after a few days or a few weeks in the false belief that mowing the lawn will be enough to stop their annihilatory ambitions against the Jews. We didn't want to give in to feeling hate for too long. But then came October the 7th, and we learned that without Hamas's total and final destruction, Jews will continue to be murdered by these savages for the next 1,000 years. Carrying forward this military campaign is taking and will continue to take a huge emotional toll on all of us, because just like Ricardo Lux said, we don't want to feel hatred. We don't want to have anger in our hearts, and we don't want to spend our time thinking about the bad guys. We don't want conflict, and we certainly don't want to be at the center of it. But if intellectually we recognize that Israel cannot survive without Hamas's total destruction, then emotionally we have to be there too if we have any hope of achieving our objectives. We need that anger. It is justified and it is important. Rivka just came back from Israel, and she told me that on one particularly difficult day of her trip, where she was encountering a lot of devastation, she said, I felt angry, right? And I said, good. That's perfect for my sermon, and I'm going to share it with everybody. There were 2 altars in the temple to remind us that our intellect and our emotions have to work together if we want to effect great change in ourselves and in the world around us. Hatred is a dangerous emotion. It can become a cancer, but the wise and moral person knows that it can also be essential for the upholding of justice. They can embrace its importance and direct it so that evil can be defeated, so that fear doesn't need to animate our lives, and so that we can do what we need to do to satisfy our most simple desire, to live in security, tranquility, and peace. Shabbat Shalom.